What would you do if your own family treated you like a servant for years, only to discover that you secretly owned everything they had? She scrubbed their floors. She cooked their meals. She suffered in silence. But the day a mysterious lawyer knocked on the door, every lie began to collapse. What they never expected was that the girl they humiliated was about to become the most powerful person in the room. Stay until the very end, because every betrayal comes back with unforgettable karma. I was 17 the first time my stepmother handed me a bucket instead of a birthday gift. She smiled as if it was perfectly normal. The floors need to shine before the guests arrive. The smell of lemon cleaner filled my nose, cold water soaked through my shoes. My hands stung from harsh soap. Laughter echoed from the dining room. Crystal glasses clinked together. Expensive perfume drifted through the hallway. Nobody called my name. Nobody asked where I was. From the kitchen doorway, I watched my stepbrother unwrap a brand new sports car key. Everyone applauded. My father stood beside him with pride glowing across his face. I scrubbed another stain from the marble floor. The reflection staring back at me looked more like a maid than a daughter. My mother had died when I was 10. She had filled every room with warmth, fresh bread, soft music, long hugs that made every fear disappear. After she was gone, silence replaced everything she had been. A year later, my father married Diane. She entered our home wearing expensive jewelry and a perfect smile. At first, she acted kind. She bought me clothes. She braided my hair. She called me sweetheart whenever my father was listening. The kindness disappeared within weeks. Her smile became sharp. Every compliment turned into an order. Every mistake became an excuse for punishment. You are old enough to earn your place. That sentence became the law of the house. I woke before sunrise every morning. I prepared breakfast. I washed dishes. I vacuumed every room. I polished windows until my arms trembled. After school, I cooked dinner. After dinner, I cleaned again. Only then was I allowed to finish homework. Sometimes the clock showed midnight before I climbed into bed. My father never noticed, or perhaps he chose not to notice. Whenever I tried to explain, Diane cried. She claimed I hated her. She claimed I wanted to destroy the family. My father always believed her. He would sigh. Then he would tell me to respect my new mother. Respect. That word tasted bitter. My stepbrother, Mason, enjoyed every minute of my misery. He left dirty clothes on the floor because he knew I would be forced to wash them. He spilled juice across the table and laughed while I cleaned it. He invited friends over just so they could order me around. One afternoon, one of his friends asked if I worked for the family. Before I could answer, Mason laughed. Basically, everyone laughed with him. The heat rushed into my face. I lowered my eyes. I carried the empty plates back to the kitchen. That night, I cried into my pillow. No one heard me, or no one cared. Years passed. The house became larger. The family became wealthier. Yet somehow my bedroom became smaller. The wallpaper peeled from the corners. Rain leaked through the old window frame. Winter winds slipped through tiny cracks. Meanwhile, Diane redecorated every other room. Imported furniture arrived every month. New paintings covered the walls. Fresh flowers stood in crystal vases. Guests praised the beauty of the mansion. None of them ever opened the door to the tiny room at the end of the hallway. That room belonged to me. My only escape came from the attic. High behind dusty boxes sat an old rocking chair. My mother used to sit there while reading. The chair still creaked in the same gentle rhythm. The air smelled of cedar wood and forgotten memories. Inside one dusty trunk, I found old family photographs. There were pictures of my parents laughing on beaches, pictures of birthdays, pictures of Christmas mornings, pictures where my father smiled with genuine happiness. A folded letter slipped from one photo album. My hands shook as I unfolded it. It was written in my mother's handwriting. Her graceful letters filled the page. She wrote about love. She wrote about hope. She wrote about protecting me no matter what happened. Near the bottom, she mentioned something strange. She thanked my grandfather for helping her establish safeguards for my future safeguards. The word echoed inside my mind. I searched the trunk for hours. There were old tax papers, family recipes, receipts, holiday cards. Nothing explained what she meant. When I asked my father about my grandfather, his face hardened. There is no reason to bring up the past. He walked away before I could ask another question. Diane watched the conversation from across the room. For the first time, I noticed fear hiding behind her confident smile. The next morning, the attic door had a brand new lock. My mother's trunk disappeared. Every photograph vanished. Every letter vanished. As if someone wanted to erase every trace she had ever existed. That frightened me more than anything Diane had ever done. People only destroy evidence when they fear what it might reveal. I started paying closer attention. Late at night, I heard whispered conversations behind the office door. Whenever I entered the room, voices stopped immediately. Folders disappeared into locked drawers. My name floated through the silence more than once. One rainy evening, I carried fresh towels upstairs. As I passed the office, I heard Diane speaking. She must never learn the truth. Another voice answered, "It belonged to my father." I know. If she discovers those documents, everything changes. My heartbeat pounded against my ribs. The towel slipped from my hands onto the hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the hallway. Silence followed, then footsteps rushed toward the door. I grabbed the towels and ran before anyone opened it. That night's sleep never came. Questions circled through my mind until sunrise. What documents? What truth? Why were they afraid? The answers remained hidden, until 3 months later. A black luxury car rolled slowly through the front gate. None of us recognized it. A silver-haired man stepped out, wearing a perfectly tailored suit. He carried a leather briefcase. His expression remained calm, professional, almost emotionless. Diane hurried outside before he reached the front steps. She forced a smile. The smile looked painfully fake. The man introduced himself as Mr. Caldwell. He asked to speak with my father immediately. They disappeared into the library. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. Raised voices escaped through the closed doors, then complete silence. When the library finally opened, my father looked pale. Diane looked even worse. Her hands trembled so badly that she dropped a crystal vase. Glass exploded across the marble floor. Nobody asked me to clean it, for the first time in years. Nobody even noticed I was standing there. Mr. Caldwell turned toward me. He studied my face carefully. His expression softened. "You resemble your mother." Those 5 words froze everyone in the room. Diane stepped between us. "There is nothing else to discuss." Mr. Caldwell calmly opened his briefcase. He removed a thick envelope sealed with dark blue wax. "I believe there is everything to discuss." He placed the envelope on the dining table. Every eye followed it. The room felt colder. The grandfather clock ticked louder than ever before. Mr. Caldwell broke the wax seal. He unfolded several official documents. Then he looked directly into my eyes. "I have spent years searching for you." My breath caught in my throat. My father closed his eyes, as if he already knew what was about to happen. Mr. Caldwell continued speaking. "Your grandfather passed away last month. I was appointed executor of his estate. I am here because his final instructions were very specific." Diane gripped the edge of the table. Her knuckles turned white. Mr. Caldwell slid the first document toward me. Everything he owned was left to a single beneficiary. The room became so quiet that I could hear the rain tapping against the windows. Then he spoke the sentence that changed every life inside that house forever. "The sole heir is you." Mr. Caldwell's words settled over the room like a heavy storm. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed. The rain outside grew louder. Each drop struck the tall windows like tiny hammers. My father slowly lowered himself into a chair. His face had lost every trace of color. Diane stared at the papers. Her lips trembled. That is impossible. Mr. Caldwell calmly adjusted his glasses. I assure you, it is completely legal. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake. He pushed another document across the table. The estate has already passed through probate. The transfer became effective 4 weeks ago. Diane grabbed the papers with shaking hands. Her eyes darted across every page. The confidence she had carried for years vanished. She looked terrified. Mason laughed nervously. So what? My grandfather owned a little money. My father owns this house. Mr. Caldwell looked directly at him. Your father owns very little. The smile disappeared from Mason's face. My client inherited 3 companies, 6 commercial buildings, a private investment portfolio, nearly 800 acres of farmland, a collection of historical properties, several international accounts, and controlling ownership of Ashford Holdings. Silence swallowed the room. Even the grandfather clock seemed to stop ticking. Mason blinked several times. What is Ashford Holdings? Mr. Caldwell answered without emotion. The corporation that quietly owns the mortgage on this estate. My father looked down. He refused to meet my eyes. A cold wave rushed through my body. I slowly turned toward him. You knew. He remained silent. You knew all along. His shoulders sank. I was trying to protect everyone. My voice echoed through the dining room. Protect everyone except me. No one answered. Mr. Caldwell opened another folder. Your grandfather anticipated resistance. He prepared a recorded statement. He placed a small digital recorder onto the table. He pressed a button. Stott crackled for a moment. Then an elderly man's voice filled the room. Strong, calm, determined. If you are hearing this, then I am gone. I hope my granddaughter is standing in this room. My chest tightened. I failed to protect my daughter. I refuse to fail her child. Diane slowly stepped backward. The recording continued. I watched from a distance because your mother asked me to. She believed your father loved her. She believed he would honor his promises. I hoped she was right. I was wrong. The room felt colder with every sentence. I discovered that your father signed agreements giving Diane partial control over family assets only months after your mother's funeral. I also discovered repeated attempts to locate the trust created for you. My father's breathing became uneven. I hid everything. I transferred every asset under my authority. I created conditions that could never be changed. The inheritance belongs only to my granddaughter. No spouse, no stepchild, no relative, only her. The recording paused. Then came the final sentence. If anyone treated her as less than family while waiting for my death, then they deserve every consequence that follows. The recorder clicked off. No body moved. The silence became unbearable. Then Diane exploded. This is absurd. She manipulated him. Your mother poisoned his mind. Mr. Caldwell interrupted immediately. The recording was made before your marriage. Diane froze. Her excuse collapsed instantly. Mason slammed his fist at the table. This belongs to our family. Mr. Caldwell calmly corrected him. It never did. He handed me a polished wooden box. Inside rested dozens of keys. Each one carried a small engraved tag: Voss, Vault, Lake House Archives, Headquarters. They felt impossibly heavy in my hands. As if every year of suffering had transformed into solid metal, my father finally spoke. I can explain. I looked at him. For years I had waited to hear those words. Now they sounded empty. What exactly will you explain? That you watched while they treated me like a servant? That you ignored every bruise on my hands? That you locked away my mother's memories? His eyes filled with tears. I thought keeping peace was the best choice. You sacrificed me for peace. His head lowered. He had no answer. Mr. Caldwell checked his watch. There is one final matter. Everyone looked toward him. The estate includes legal instructions concerning this residence. My heartbeat accelerated again. He unfolded another document. The property currently stands as collateral under Ashford Holdings. He looked directly at me. As majority owner, you now control that debt, Diane gasped. No. Mr. Caldwell nodded. Yes, the monthly payments have not been made for 8 consecutive months. My father buried his face in his hands. I stared at him. You stopped paying? He nodded slowly. The business lost money. Diane kept believing another investment would fix everything. Mr. Caldwell spoke again. The investments failed. The debt grew. The house entered default. Mason looked around the mansion in panic. You mean we can lose this place? Mr. Caldwell answered with brutal honesty. The current owner may choose any legal action. Every eye turned toward me. The same people who had ignored me for years were suddenly waiting for my decision. Diane slowly approached. Her voice became soft, almost sweet. We are family. The words sounded strange coming from her. You would never throw family onto the street. I remembered every freezing morning, every insult, every meal eaten alone, every birthday forgotten, every tear hidden beneath my blanket. Family. She had never used that word when I needed it. I took a slow breath. I need time. Mr. Caldwell nodded. Of course. He handed me a business card. A driver is waiting outside. He will take you somewhere safe. Diane immediately objected. She belongs here. Mr. Caldwell looked at her with quiet authority. No, she has belonged elsewhere for a very long time. Outside, the rain had stopped. Fresh air filled my lungs. For the first time in years, I felt as though I could breathe. A black sedan waited beside the gate. The driver opened the rear door. As the mansion disappeared behind us, I looked back one last time. The enormous house suddenly seemed smaller. Its walls no longer looked powerful. They looked haunted. 40 minutes later, we arrived at a sprawling estate surrounded by ancient oak trees. Iron gates slowly opened. Beyond them stood a breathtaking stone manor. Fountains sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. Flower gardens stretched across the hills. A peaceful lake reflected the sky like polished glass. This belonged to your grandfather, the driver said. It belongs to you now. My footsteps echoed through the entrance hall. Everything smelled of polished wood and fresh flowers. Portraits lined the walls. One painting stopped me instantly. It showed my mother. She looked exactly as I remembered. Her bright smile, her gentle eyes. Her hand rested on the shoulder of an elderly man, my grandfather. I stood before the portrait for several minutes. Tears quietly rolled down my cheeks. Not tears of sadness, tears of finally feeling seen. An elderly housekeeper approached with careful steps. She smiled warmly. We have waited many years to welcome you home. Home. No one had called any place home for me in a very long time. She introduced herself as Margaret. I worked for your grandfather for 36 years. He spoke about you almost every day. She led me into a beautiful library. Every shelf reached toward the high ceiling. Sunlight poured through stained glass windows. On the center desk rested a single envelope. My name was written across the front, in my mother's handwriting. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was another letter. The paper carried the faint scent of lavender, the same perfume my mother always wore. The first sentence stole every breath from my lungs. If you are reading this, then the secret I protected all these years has finally reached you. I lowered myself into the leather chair beside the fireplace. The paper felt fragile between my fingers. Every heartbeat echoed through the silent library. I began reading. My precious daughter, I knew there might come a day when you would question why I seemed distant. It was never because I stopped loving you. It was because danger had entered our family. A chill traveled down my spine. The room suddenly felt colder. The fire crackled softly. Outside, wind rustled through the ancient oak trees. I discovered that certain people cared more about wealth than about family. I also discovered documents proving they were searching for every asset connected to your name. I could not risk losing you. So your grandfather and I created another plan. I swallowed hard. My hands trembled. If anything happened to me, every important document would disappear. The truth would remain hidden until you became strong enough to stand on your own. You must never believe you were abandoned. You were protected. A tear landed on the paper. I carefully wiped it away. There is another truth you deserve to know. My breathing slowed. Every word became heavier. The inheritance is only one part of your future. Your grandfather believed you should earn the rest through wisdom. He created a private archive. It contains every business lesson he learned during 60 years. It also contains evidence. Evidence. The word echoed inside my mind. What evidence? I whispered to myself. Almost as if the letter could answer, my eyes continued down the page. If anyone ever attempts to challenge your inheritance, the archive will reveal everything. The recordings, the contracts, the bank transfers, the private investigations, the hidden agreements, everything. I slowly folded the letter. Margaret quietly placed a warm cup of tea beside me. Her kind smile reminded me of my mother. He loved preparing for every possibility. She nodded toward the far wall. There is something else you should see. She pressed her hand against one of the wooden bookshelves. A soft mechanical click echoed through the library. The shelf slowly slid sideways. Behind it stood a narrow stone staircase leading underground. Cool air drifted upward. It carried the scent of old paper and polished wood. Soft lights automatically illuminated the steps. Margaret looked at me. Only your fingerprints can unlock the lower vault. I stared at her in surprise. My fingerprints? She smiled. Your grandfather planned far ahead. At the bottom of the staircase stood a steel door unlike anything I had ever seen. A small glass panel glowed softly. I placed my hand against it. A gentle electronic tone sounded. Then another. Green lights spread across the frame. The massive lock released with a deep metallic sound. The door slowly opened. My breath caught. The underground archive stretched farther than I could see. Thousands of organized files filled towering shelves. Computer servers hummed quietly. Rows of locked cabinets reflected the white ceiling lights. Large digital monitors displayed security feeds from different properties. It looked less like a storage room. It looked like the headquarters of an international corporation. In the center stood an elegant wooden desk. A sealed black envelope rested on top. Only 4 words appeared across the front. Open this first. I carefully broke the seal. Inside was another handwritten note. My granddaughter, if you are standing here, then you have already survived the hardest part, the loneliness, the betrayal, the silence. Now your real education begins. A small silver key slipped from the envelope. Margaret pointed toward a nearby cabinet. The key fit perfectly. Inside waited dozens of leather journals. Each carried a year, all the way to the present. They are his personal journals, Margaret explained. He documented every important meeting, every negotiation, every betrayal, every victory. He wanted you to learn from experience instead of textbooks. I carefully opened the first journal. Neat handwriting covered every page. Business strategies, leadership lessons, warnings about dishonest partners, observations about human nature. One paragraph stopped me. Never fear losing money. Fear trusting people who smile only when wealth enters the room. The words described Diane perfectly. Another entry mentioned my father. Edward possesses intelligence. Unfortunately, he mistakes kindness for avoiding difficult decisions. He refuses confrontation. One day, that weakness may cost him everything. I slowly closed the journal. My grandfather had understood my father years before anyone else. Margaret guided me toward another section. Large framed photographs covered an entire wall. Every employee who had worked for my grandfather appeared there. Hundreds of smiling faces, different generations, different decades. Near the center hung a recent photograph. The employees stood together outside company headquarters. An empty space remained in the front row. A small brass plaque sat beneath it, reserved for future chairperson. I stared silently. Margaret stepped beside me. That place has always been yours. I have never managed a company. I have never led anyone. She smiled gently. Neither had your grandfather. He learned. So will you. The following morning began before sunrise. A chauffeur drove me to corporate headquarters. The skyscraper dominated the downtown skyline. Glass reflected the morning sun. The entrance doors opened automatically. Inside, polished marble stretched across the enormous lobby. Employees hurried in every direction. No one recognized me. That lasted exactly 12 seconds. Mr. Caldwell entered through another set of doors. He walked directly beside me. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Whispers spread through the lobby. Elevator doors opened without anyone touching them. Security guards nodded respectfully. The ride to the executive floor felt strangely quiet. When the doors opened again, a long hallway led toward enormous conference rooms. At the very end stood double oak doors. Gold letters identified the room. Board of Directors. Mr. Caldwell looked at me. They are waiting. My palms became damp. I took a deep breath, then I stepped inside. 20 executives immediately stood. Some smiled warmly. Others studied me with uncertainty. One elderly woman approached first. Silver hair framed her gentle face. She extended both hands. You have your mother's eyes. Emotion filled her voice. I worked beside her. My heart skipped. My mother worked here? The woman nodded. She helped build this company. She was brilliant. Your grandfather believed she would someday lead everything. The realization hit me harder than I expected. No one had ever told me. Not my father, not anyone. Another piece of my life had been stolen. The meeting began. Financial reports filled enormous screens. Properties, investments, future projects, every number seemed overwhelming. One executive cleared his throat. There is another issue requiring immediate attention. The room grew tense. He projected several photographs. I instantly recognized the mansion where I had grown up. The images looked different now. Luxury cars were being removed. Professional movers carried expensive furniture outside. What is happening? Mr. Caldwell answered quietly. The bank inspection has already started. I looked closer. Red warning notices had been attached to the front gate. Several strangers walked across the lawn with clipboards. Deanne stood outside arguing with them. Even from the photographs, I could see the panic on her face. Another executive spoke. The family has requested an emergency meeting. They wish to negotiate. I remained silent. The room waited. Every executive watched my expression. Finally, I asked one question. Have they offered to apologize? Silence. No one answered. Mr. Caldwell slowly shook his head. They have only asked to protect their lifestyle. The answer hurt more than I expected, even now. After everything, their first concern remained money. Not family, not regret, not me. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched endlessly below. People hurried along sidewalks. Cars filled every street. Life continued, completely unaware that mine had changed forever. I turned back toward the board. Arranged the meeting. Mr. Caldwell nodded. When? I looked once more at the photographs of the mansion. The place where I had been treated like invisible furniture. The place where I had cried myself to sleep. The place where my mother's memory had been erased. Then I answered. Tomorrow morning. I want every member of that household sitting across the table from me, and before they say a single word, I want them to understand exactly who they are asking for mercy. The next morning arrived beneath a gray sky. Low clouds drifted across the city. A cold breeze swept between the towering buildings. The conference room overlooked the skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows filled the space with pale morning light. A polished walnut table stretched nearly 30 feet from end to end. Fresh coffee rested untouched. Crystal water glasses reflected the light. Everything felt perfectly still. Mr. Caldwell stood beside the entrance. Their vehicle just arrived. My stomach tightened, not from fear, from anticipation. Years of silence had led to this single moment. The elevator doors opened. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. The conference room doors slowly swung open. My father entered first. His expensive suit looked wrinkled. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. He appeared 20 years older than the last time I had seen him. Behind him walked Diane. Gone were the designer dresses. Gone were the expensive diamonds. She wore a simple navy outfit. Her confident posture had disappeared. Mason followed last. His shoulders slumped. His expression carried anger more than regret. No one spoke. Mr. Caldwell gestured toward 3 empty chairs. "They are waiting for you." The sound of the chairs sliding across the wooden floor echoed through the room. The silence lasted almost an entire minute. Finally, my father looked at me. "I hardly recognize you," I answered calmly. I finally recognized myself. His eyes lowered. Diane forced a gentle smile. "We have all made mistakes." I looked directly at her. "No, you made choices." The smile disappeared. "There is a difference." She clasped her hands together. "We never imagined things would become so complicated." I remembered icy mornings. I remembered scrubbing floors until my fingers bled. Nothing about those memories felt complicated. They felt intentional. Mason leaned forward. "So what happens now?" His tone carried impatience, not remorse. I folded my hands. "That depends on why you came." He frowned. "We came because this situation is unfair." Mr. Caldwell quietly closed a folder. "I recommend choosing your next words carefully." Mason ignored him. "You already have everything. Why destroy us?" I looked into his eyes. For years, I asked myself a different question. Why destroy me? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. My father finally spoke. "I failed you." Those words sounded sincere, painful, heavy. "I should have listened. I should have protected you. I cannot change the past, but I would spend the rest of my life trying to repair it." His voice cracked. For the first time in years, I believed he actually meant what he said. Diane immediately reached for his arm. "Edward." He gently pulled away. I spent years pretending not to see. I watched my own daughter disappear. I told myself I was avoiding conflict. In reality, I was avoiding responsibility. Tears filled his eyes. "I will regret that forever." The room fell silent again. Then Diane stood. She slowly walked around the table. She stopped only a few feet away from me. "I know you hate me. I understand. But people change. I am asking for another chance." I studied her face. For years, I had become skilled at recognizing fake kindness. Something still felt wrong. I asked one simple question. "When was my birthday?" She blinked. You lived in the same house as me for years. When was my birthday?" She searched desperately for an answer. Nothing came. "What was my favorite meal?" Silence. "What was my favorite subject in school?" Again, nothing. I nodded slowly. "You are asking for another chance. You never even bothered to know the person you hurt." She lowered her eyes. Her shoulders shook. Whether the tears were real or not, I could not tell. Then Mr. Caldwell quietly placed another folder onto the table. "There is additional information." I looked toward him. "What information?" "It arrived yesterday evening." He opened the folder. Several financial records appeared. Wire transfers, proforty agreements, bank statements. One page carried Diane's signature. Another carried my father's. A third contained Mason's. My father stared at the documents, his face drained of color. "What is this?" Mr. Caldwell answered. "Our forensic accountants completed their investigation. It appears someone continued attempting to locate hidden assets even after your grandfather passed away." Diane froze. Mason looked away. "There were unauthorized searches, private investigators, attempts to access restricted legal records." My father slowly turned toward Diane. You told me we stopped. She remained silent. You promised. Still, nothing. His voice became louder. You promised. Diane finally whispered. I was trying to protect us. You were trying to steal from my daughter. His words echoed across the conference room. She burst into tears. I was scared. I did not want to lose everything. My father stood. You already lost everything. He walked toward the windows. His reflection stared back at him, broken, ashamed. Mr. Caldwell continued. There is more. The room became still once again. Several investigators were paid using funds borrowed against the house. My father slowly closed his eyes. Which means, Mr. Caldwell nodded. The debt became even larger. My father whispered to himself. All because of greed. Diane collapsed into her chair, her face buried in her hands. Mason looked completely stunned. For the first time, arrogance disappeared from his expression. Only fear remained. I quietly stood. Every eye followed me. I walked toward the windows. The city spread beneath us. Millions of strangers. Millions of different lives. Mine had changed forever. Without turning around, I spoke. When I was 12 years old, I had a school awards ceremony. I won first place in science. I looked for my family in every seat. No one came. The driver picked me up 3 hours later. I ate dinner alone. I washed everyone's dishes before going to bed. I cried because I thought I had done something wrong. My voice remained calm, but every word carried years of pain. When I was 16, I had pneumonia. I could barely stand. Diane ordered me to clean the guest rooms because visitors were arriving. I fainted halfway down the staircase. The doctor later told me another hour without treatment could have become dangerous. I slowly turned back toward them. I remember everything. Every face lowered. I cannot erase those memories. I do not want revenge. I want accountability. Mr. Caldwell looked at me. What are your instructions? I returned to my chair. I had thought about this all night. I knew exactly what I wanted. My father may remain in the guest cottage on the lake property. Everyone looked surprised. He will receive a modest salary if he chooses to work with the historical archives. He must earn every dollar. He will not receive ownership. He will receive opportunity. Tears rolled down my father's face. Thank you. I nodded once. Then I looked at Diane. You will receive enough money to rent a small apartment for 6 months. Nothing more. You are healthy. You can work. You can rebuild your own life. She stared at me in disbelief. You are not leaving me homeless? I answered honestly. No. I refuse to become the person you were. Then I faced Mason. You are 24 years old. You are capable of supporting yourself. You receive nothing. His chair scraped loudly across the floor. This is ridiculous. I deserve better. I calmly smiled. No, you deserve exactly what you earned. His face turned bright red. He stormed toward the door. Halfway there, he stopped. Without looking back, he quietly asked, What if I apologize? The room became silent again. I thought carefully before answering. An apology offered only after losing everything is difficult to believe. He remained still. Then he slowly lowered his head. For the first time since I had known him, he looked genuinely ashamed. Without another word, he walked out. The door closed softly behind him. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Mr. Caldwell received a message on his phone. He read it once. Then again, a strange expression crossed his face. He looked directly at me. There is one final matter. What happened? He placed the phone on the table. Our security team has discovered someone entered your grandfather's underground archive late last night. My heartbeat stopped. That is impossible, so we believed. He enlarged a security image. A shadowy figure wearing dark clothing appeared on the screens. The person's face remained hidden beneath a hood. In one hand was a flashlight. In the other was a small metal case. The intruder was standing directly in front of the cabinet that contained every piece of evidence your grandfather had spent decades protecting. And according to the timestamp, the break-in had occurred only 30 minutes after I left the estate. Every person in the conference room leaned toward the screen. The blurry image filled the monitor. The hooded figure stood perfectly still. One gloved hand rested on the vault cabinet. The timestamp glowed in the lower corner, 1:42 p.m. My pulse pounded in my ears. Margaret had locked the estate before sunset. The fingerprint scanner protected the archive. The steel door required 2 separate security codes. Breaking inside should have been impossible. Mr. Caldwell zoomed in. The image became clearer. The intruder carried a black metal case. Professional, compact. Exactly the type used by experienced locksmiths. Another image appeared. The figure had reached the underground staircase. A third image followed. The person stood directly beside the hidden bookshelf. Then the screen went black. "What happened?" I asked. The cameras stopped recording. For how long? 8 minutes. A cold silence settled over the room. 8 minutes. That was more than enough time to steal documents or destroy them. Mr. Caldwell pressed another button. The final camera activated. It overlooked the front gates. At exactly 11:50 p.m., the hooded figure emerged from the manor. The person climbed into a dark SUV. No license plate appeared. The vehicle disappeared into the night. My father stared at the screen. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Did they take anything? We do not know yet." I immediately stood. "I am going back to the estate." Mr. Caldwell nodded. "I have already arranged transportation." Within 20 minutes, our convoy entered the long private driveway. Security vehicles surrounded the manor. Uniformed guards searched every corner of the grounds. The peaceful estate no longer felt peaceful. It felt violated. Margaret waited at the entrance. Her face looked pale. "I am so sorry. You have nothing to apologize for." She clasped her trembling hands. They knew exactly where they were going. The hidden bookshelf remained open. The underground staircase glowed beneath the bright security lights. I hurried down the stone steps. The steel vault door stood wide open. The air inside felt strangely cold. Cabinets lined the walls exactly as before. Nothing appeared disturbed, yet something felt different, too quiet, too perfect. Mr. Caldwell carefully inspected the first cabinet. The locks remained intact. Every journal still rested on its shelf. Another cabinet held legal files. Untouched, the servers continued humming. No wires had been cut. No computers were damaged. Margaret frowned. If nothing was stolen, then why risk coming here? I slowly turned toward the wooden desk. The black envelope still rested where I had left it. Beside it sat a brass compass. Yesterday it had pointed north. Now it pointed east. I picked it up. It felt unusually heavy. There was a faint clicking sound inside. Mr. Caldwell noticed immediately. "May I?" I handed him the compass. He carefully examined it. Then he smiled. "I believe your grandfather expected visitors." He twisted the outer ring. A hidden compartment quietly opened. Inside rested another tiny silver key. Margaret covered her mouth. "I never knew." A folded note accompanied the key. Only one sentence appeared. "If someone reaches this room without permission, then they are searching for the wrong treasure." I looked around again. The wrong treasure. Mr. Caldwell repeated the words, meaning there is another one. The silver key carried a tiny engraving, L17. Margaret suddenly gasped. "The wine cellar. There are 17 storage rooms." We hurried upstairs. The stone cellar stretched beneath the western wing. Rows of ancient wine bottles filled wooden racks. Each section carried a number, 1, 2, 3, until finally, 17. The room looked ordinary. Dust covered the shelves. Old barrels lined the walls. Nothing appeared unusual. Then I noticed something. Every room contained wine, except this one. The section, 17, held only empty shelves. I walked inside. The air smelled of cedar. My footsteps echoed strangely, as though the wall behind me was hollow. I knocked gently. A deep sound answered. Mr. Caldwell joined me. There is definitely empty space behind this wall. The silver key fit into a tiny lock hidden beneath one shelf. A quiet mechanical rumble filled the cellar. The entire wall slowly slid sideways. Cool air drifted outward. Behind it stood another room. Smaller. Older, far more personal. Soft lights automatically illuminated the space. At its center stood a single oak table. Upon it rested 3 wooden boxes. Each carried a brass nameplate. Business, family, truth. My eyes settled on the final box, truth. I carefully lifted the lid. Inside rested dozens of videotapes, hard drives, photographs, audio recordings. Every item carried dates spanning nearly 20 years. My grandfather had documented everything. There was also another handwritten letter. My granddaughter, if you discovered this room, then someone has already attempted to reach the archive. They always believed wealth was hidden inside vaults. They never understood that knowledge is the greatest fortune. I smiled. Despite everything. That sounded exactly like him. The letter continued. The first archive contains enough evidence to defend your inheritance. This room contains evidence capable of exposing every betrayal committed against our family. My heartbeat quickened. There are recordings of secret meetings, signed agreements, private conversations, insurance fraud, forged financial statements, and one recording your father has never seen. My father stood silently behind me. His breathing became uneven. What recording? I reached into the box. One envelope carried his name. Edward. I handed it to him. His hands shook. Inside rested a flash drive. Another short note accompanied it. For your eyes only. He looked at me. I should watch this alone. I nodded. He quietly walked into the next room. The heavy wooden door closed behind him. Only silence remained. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Suddenly we heard a muffled cry. Not anger, not surprise. Pure heartbreak. The door slowly opened. My father stepped back into the room. His face was covered with tears. He looked as though the weight of 20 years had crashed onto his shoulders. All at once, he could barely speak. I saw your mother. My heart stopped. What? He nodded. The recording was made 2 days before she died. His voice broke completely. She told me she believed someone inside our own family was trying to destroy us. She begged me never to trust anyone who pushed me to remarry too quickly. He collapsed into a nearby chair. I ignored every warning. He covered his face. I failed her. No one spoke. Then Margaret quietly asked, "Was there anything else?" He slowly nodded. Yes. There was one final sentence. His eyes met mine. She looked directly into the camera. She smiled, and she said, "If our daughter is ever watching this, tell her that the greatest inheritance I could leave behind was never money. It was proof of the truth." Tears filled my eyes, for the first time in 16 years. I felt as though my mother had spoken directly to me. Then one of the security officers rushed into the hidden room. His breathing was fast. His face carried urgency. "Miss, we found something outside." "What is it?" He held out a small black object sealed inside an evidence bag. It was leather. Had dropped it while escaping across the gardens. There was no identification, no credit cards. Only one photograph. The edges were faded with age. It showed my grandfather standing beside 2 young men. One was my father. The other man was someone I had never seen before. Across the back of the photograph, written in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting, were 6 chilling words. The one beside Edward betrayed us first. I turned the photograph over again. The handwriting was unmistakable, bold, precise. Every letter matched the journals I had already read. The unknown man stood with one arm around my father's shoulder. Both of them looked young, confident, completely unaware of what the future would become. "Who is he?" I asked quietly. My father stared at the photograph for several long seconds. Then recognition slowly spread across his face. His eyes widened. "No," his voice cracked. "It cannot be. You know him." He nodded slowly. His name is Victor Langley. The name meant nothing to me, but it clearly meant something to everyone else. Margaret suddenly sat down. Her face had become ghostly pale. I have not heard that name in almost 20 years. Mr. Caldwell's looked surprised. You knew him? She nodded. He worked for your grandfather. He was his closest business advisor. He practically lived here. My father took a deep breath. We met in college. He became my closest friend. He introduced me to investors. He attended my wedding. He carried your baby gifts when you were born. A heavy silence filled the hidden room. If he was so close to the family, I whispered, then why did grandfather write those words? No one answered immediately. Mr. Caldwell carefully examined the wallet. There is another compartment. He pressed against the leather lining. A hidden pocket opened. Inside rested a tiny brass key. A folded storage receipt accompanied it. The receipt belonged to a private safety deposit company. The rental agreement had been renewed every year, until 3 months ago. The date matched my grandfather's death almost exactly. Mr. Caldwell folded the paper. I believe Victor expected someone to retrieve whatever is inside. My father looked exhausted. I thought he'd disappeared years ago. Margaret shook her head. He did disappear, without saying goodbye. One morning, he simply never returned. My grandfather never spoke his name again. I noticed another detail on the photograph. Victor wore a distinctive silver ring. A black stone rested in its center. Around it was an unusual symbol, a raven with its wings spread wide. The same symbol appeared on the metal case carried by the intruder. My heartbeat quickened. The intruder. Mr. Caldwell immediately enlarged the security image. There it was. Tiny, almost impossible to notice. The identical raven emblem reflected beneath the flashlight. It is the same mark. The room fell silent. My father slowly stood. If Victor is still alive, then he is the one who entered the estate. Margaret frowned. After 20 years? What could he possibly want now? Mr. Caldwell answered quietly, perhaps something he never managed to find. I looked around the hidden chamber. My grandfather had anticipated this. He knew someone would eventually come searching. The question was why. I returned to the third wooden box. Several folders remained unopened. One was labeled simply, Langley. I carefully untied the ribbon. Inside rested newspaper clippings, old contracts, photographs, personal letters. Near the bottom lay a sealed cassette tape. Another handwritten note accompanied it. Play this only after discovering Victor's name. We carried the tape upstairs. The manor still contained an old recorder in my grandfather's study. Dust covered the wooden machine. Mr. Caldwell inserted the cassette. The tape hissed softly. Then my grandfather's familiar voice filled the room. Victor, if you are hearing this, then my granddaughter has already uncovered your betrayal. You always underestimated her. You also underestimated me. The room became perfectly still. I knew you were stealing company information. I knew you were selling trade secrets. I even knew who paid you. My father gripped the edge of the desk. His knuckles turned white. But the greatest betrayal was not against my business. It was against my family. The tape crackled. Then continued. You convinced Edward that every warning came from fear. You encouraged distance between husband and wife. You whispered lies. You manipulated friendships. You planted distrust. You believed wealth would eventually become yours. My father closed his eyes. Pain spread across his face. I believed him. He whispered the words to himself. I believed every word. The recording continued. When my daughter became suspicious, you panicked. You disappeared before I could expose you. I spent years gathering proof. I never found you, but I knew greed would eventually bring you back. The tape ended with one final sentence. And when you return, my granddaughter will be waiting. The recorder clicked into silence. No one moved. It felt as though my grandfather had been speaking directly into the room. Even decades later, Mr. Caldwell slowly removed the tape. He knew. He knew Victor would return someday. A security officer hurried inside. "Sir." We finished searching the gardens. "Did you find anything?" "Footprints." "They lead toward the old boathouse." We followed immediately. The path wound through tall oak trees. Dry leaves crunched beneath our shoes. The lake shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. The abandoned boathouse stood near the water's edge. Weathered wood creaked in the breeze. One of the officers pointed toward the entrance. The lock was forced. Inside smelled of damp wood and engine oil. Dust covered almost everything. Almost. Fresh, muddy footprints crossed the floor. They stopped beside an old workbench. A small notebook rested there. It had not been there yesterday. I carefully opened it. Every page contained hand-drawn maps of the estate. Intricate passages, security cameras, high entrances. Someone had spent months studying my grandfather's property. Then I reached the final page. Only one sentence appeared, written in fresh black ink. "You found the wrong room." A cold shiver ran through my body. Mr. Caldwell read the sentence twice. He left this for us. He wanted us to know he was here. The next page contained another message. "The last key is still missing." Margaret looked confused. "What last key?" I reached into my pocket, the silver key from the compass. The brass key from the wallet. I remembered something. There were 3 wooden boxes. Business, family, truth. I looked at the keys in my hand. There have only been 2 hidden keys. Everyone looked at one another. Then my father suddenly spoke. "There is another room." Every head turned toward him. "What?" He nodded slowly. I remembered something after hearing the recording. When your grandfather built this manor, he once joked that every family deserves one room where no lie can enter. I thought it was only a saying. Margaret's eyes widened. The chapel. We all looked at her. There is a small private chapel beneath the eastern gardens. It has remained locked for decades. I assumed it was empty. My father slowly shook his head. No, he never allowed anyone inside. Not even me. The afternoon sun slipped behind dark clouds. Thunder rolled across the lake. Wind swept through the trees. The estate suddenly felt different, as though it had been waiting for this moment. We hurried toward the eastern gardens. Beneath climbing ivy stood an old stone chapel. Its stained glass windows glowed faintly beneath the gray sky. The ancient wooden doors remained closed. A single lock rested at the center. Unlike every other lock we had discovered, this one required 3 keys. I looked down at the 2 keys resting in my hand. One silver, one brass. Only one key remained missing. Then every light across the estate suddenly went dark. The security alarms fell silent. The cameras stopped moving. The humming generators died. Complete silence swallowed the property. Only the sound of thunder remained. From somewhere deep inside the darkened chapel, a slow metallic click echoed through the stone walls. Someone had just unlocked the door from the inside. The ancient wooden doors slowly creaked open. Cold air drifted out of the dark chapel. The scent of old stone and melted candle wax filled the evening air. Every security officer raised a flashlight. The beams swept across the empty room. There was no sign of anyone. Only rows of wooden pews, a simple stone altar, and colorful stained-glass windows glowing beneath flashes of lightning. "It is empty," one officer whispered. I shook my head. "No, I can feel someone was here." We stepped inside. Our footsteps echoed softly. Rain began tapping against the stained glass. Then I noticed fresh mud near the altar. Someone had entered only minutes earlier. The muddy footprints ended at the base of a marble statue. There they disappeared. Mr. Caldwell examined the floor. "There is another hidden door." He pressed against the stone. Nothing happened. Then my father slowly walked forward, his eyes focused on a small carving beneath the statue. A raven, the same symbol from Victor's ring. He gently turned it. A deep rumble shook the chapel. The altar slowly slid aside. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. We followed carefully. The air grew colder with every step. At the bottom stood a circular chamber. Oil lamps burned along the walls. Someone had lit them recently. In the center stood an elderly man. His silver hair reached his shoulders. A black walking cane rested in one hand. On his finger was the silver ring with the raven. Victor Langley. He looked at my father first, then at me. A slow smile crossed his face. You finally found me. No one answered. Victor looked around the room. So, the granddaughter inherited everything. I suppose Arthur planned that as well. He spoke my grandfather's name without respect. Mr. Caldwell stepped forward. You entered private property. You tampered with secured evidence. Victor smiled. I entered a place that was once almost mine. He looked directly into my eyes. Your grandfather stole my future, I answered calmly. My grandfather protected his family. Victor laughed. A family that destroyed itself. He pointed toward my father. I only gave him advice. He chose to ignore his wife. He chose to abandon his daughter. My father stepped forward. No, I made those choices. I will carry that guilt forever, but I will never allow you to hide behind my mistakes again. Victor's smile faded. For the first time, confidence left his face. I looked around the chamber. Ancient shelves lined the walls, ledgers, letters, family records. One large safe stood behind Victor. He noticed my eyes. You are wondering what is inside. I found it this morning, but I could not open it. He held up a third key, small gold. My breath caught. The final key. Victor smiled again. I searched for this key for 20 years. I finally found it. But your grandfather designed the lock for 3 keys. You have the other 2. He slowly extended the golden key toward me. I have a proposal. Mr. Caldwell immediately objected. We are not negotiating. Victor ignored him. He looked only at me. Open the safe. We divide whatever is inside. No one else ever has to know. The room became silent. I remembered every lesson from my grandfather's journals. Greed always spoke softly. It always sounded reasonable, until it destroyed everything. I smiled. My grandfather left me something far more valuable than money. Victor frowned. What? He taught me to recognize people like you. I nodded toward the officers. Arrest him. Victor suddenly turned. He attempted to run. 2 officers intercepted him before he reached the staircase. The golden key slipped from his hand. It landed on the stone floor with a sharp, metallic sound. The echo lingered through the chamber. Minutes later, Victor sat in handcuffs. His shoulders finally slumped. His long pursuit had ended. I picked up the golden key. Together, the 3 keys fit perfectly into the ancient safe. Silver, brass, gold. The heavy door unlocked with a deep click. Slowly, I pulled it open. There was no mountain of gold, no diamonds, no stacks of cash. Inside rested only a single wooden chest. I lifted the lid. Hundreds of handwritten letters filled the chest. Family photographs, children's drawings, holiday cards. My mother's first school report. My grandparents' wedding album. My first baby shoes. At the very top rested one final envelope. It simply read, "For my granddaughter." I opened it carefully. My dear child, if you are reading this, then the storm has finally passed. You may have inherited companies. You may have inherited homes. You may have inherited wealth. But those things are temporary. This chest contains what no thief can steal: love, memory, truth. If you protect these, you will never become poor. Tears rolled down my face. Around me, no one spoke. Even the officers quietly lowered their heads. I finally understood. The greatest inheritance had never been the fortune. It had been the chance to choose what kind of person I wanted to become. Months passed. The companies flourished. I surrounded myself with honest people. Employees who had served my grandfather remained by my side. Together, we expanded the business while creating scholarship programs in my mother's name. The old mansion where I had suffered was sold. The money funded shelters for young people who had nowhere else to go. Every room that once held pain became an opportunity for someone else's hope. My father accepted responsibility for his past. He quietly restored historical archives on the Lake Estate. He never asked for ownership. He simply worked each day to earn forgiveness. Deanne found work in a small accounting office. She wrote several letters of apology. I read every one. I wished her peace. But forgiveness did not require rebuilding the relationship. Mason eventually found a construction job. Years later, he visited the estate, not to ask for money, only to apologize. This time, I believed him. People can change, but only after accepting the truth. On the anniversary of my mother's birthday, I walked through the gardens with Margaret. The oak trees swayed gently in the breeze. The lake reflected the evening sky. The manor no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like home. I stopped before the portrait of my mother and grandfather. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows. Their smiles seemed warmer than ever. For years, I had believed I was nothing more than the servant of a family that never loved me. In the end, I discovered I had never been the forgotten child. I had always been the one my family had been protecting. The people who treated me like a servant lost everything they tried to take. The people who chose truth left behind something far greater than wealth. And I learned that the richest inheritance in the world is not the fortune you receive. It is the character you build while surviving the people who believed you deserved nothing. That became the legacy I chose to protect forever.